And you scoop the door.
Yeah.
It's door.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we'll call the meeting of the Oregon City Public Library Board to order. And the roll call is Cynthia Andrews is here, Nick Dierkman is, and Larry Osborne are by Zoom. Heidi Blackwell and Bill Quarton are here, and Lisa Oreskovich we're waiting for. And with that, first we have approval of minutes. The only minutes that are available at this time are we had an initial budget committee meeting. The January minutes will be available next month. Due to all the chaos in the library with the floors and the snow and everything, they just didn't get done. So, any comments on the budget committee meeting minutes?
Would that just be the individuals that were involved in it? I mean, that would approve that.
Yeah, well, the board will approve it, but were there any corrections or additions? Nick, any?
None from me.
I didn't see it. Okay, can I have
Motion to approve them.
Okay, good. Second, please.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Library director's report.
Okay, thank you, David. I will be very brief. We have some guests today, and I don't want to take up too much time. If there are any questions on any of the stats, I'll be happy to try to answer them. I will save a budget update when we get to our budget subcommittee update. The only thing I wanted to share, I hope to have a little more information. The two things I'll share, I don't yet have any information on the county task force, other than we heard at our directors group meeting that the county was very, very close to identifying who that group is going to be. And I hoped we would hear something this week, but we haven't heard yet. So I would anticipate that is imminent, that they will let us know who's going to be on that task force. I did confirm that all those task force meetings will be public meetings, so even, if I am not on that group, I will certainly be in person.
And I know Denise, our mayor, has expressed interest in being on it as well, so she may be one of the public division. If that's the case, Greg probably wouldn't, and so going to the meetings.
Yes, they're trying to make sure they have balance. They don't want to have 3 people from one city, on that. So, and then the other thing, I'll just give everybody a quick update on our procurement. We went through the first round of reviewing RFPs for self-checks and book lockers. We have identified some vendors. I can only share so much. We have identified, we went through and we scored vendors, and there are some we are going to seek some more information from, and possibly and hopefully demos of their products. That process is proceeding apace. I should be able to say more at our next. But just wanted to let everybody know that it's moving along.
Great. Any questions for the director?
The only stat that there was internet sessions there, it said 3 that were reported. I was just curious on what the outage was or what.
And it was because we were closed for the
Okay.
So the computers were generally not available. I would have to guess those 3 were probably some back end. I have to dig into that.
But I mean, the Wi-Fi was still.
Yes, Wi-Fi.
Those numbers were the same. It's just,
Yes, and Wi-Fi was available throughout the building when we were open. So that doesn't surprise me that those stayed the same. But yes, our public computers were completely down and out of the building. So yes.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody? Okay, great.
I'm sorry. One more thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hope you've all seen, we did go ahead and announce our hours change. So we got that into Trail News. We have tried to get social media, email, with that, trying to get information out. All of the public reaction that has been shared with us, both online and in person, has been very positive. People really appreciate the consistency of starting times and are looking forward to having more Sunday hours. And the commission was very complimentary as well. David and I went and chatted. So as we've talked about, should we get additional feedback, especially after we make the change, things we can do to mitigate access issues, we will certainly be doing that. But we have not all the feedback we've received so far is positive.
And I take it we'll change the sign on the door.
Yes, that is supposed to be happening. Our facilities manager has it on his calendar.
Great.
Make those changes.
All right. Any public comment?
No.
No? Okay, great. So the discussion items, we've got a couple of guests today. Pete Walter from the city, and I don't know his guests.
Ryan Davis.
Ryan Davis are going to talk about climate-friendly and equitable communities presentation. I ask you to try to keep it to a maximum of 30 minutes with interaction so that
Right.
the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'll give a brief introduction, and given the time constraint, I understand we probably want to just hit the high points of what
Yes.
we've heard so far. So the big picture is that the state has required cities and counties throughout the state to look at their parking requirements as part of an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions under the understanding that parking can actually generate traffic if you have too much of it. So that's the basic premise behind a lot of this stuff. So a lot of cities throughout the metro region have already completely waived parking minimum requirements in their zoning code. Oregon City is a metro city, and we already have minimum and maximum parking requirements, but these efforts are targeting the minimum parking and also the maximum parking as well. So we started this process with Brian's help as a consultant a few months ago, and we are under a deadline to adopt these largely prescriptive parking requirements by June 30th.
June 30th.
Yeah, of this year. So we've met with several existing groups so far and gotten direction from the city commission on which way they would like Oregon City to go. So, the next step for staff is, I think we have a meeting tomorrow night with Pratt to discuss this. And then we will be moving into the drafting the code part of this. But Brian is the expert. He's also doing work for Cornelius on the same issue. So if you could just take us through the high points and perhaps give us an update on what we've been able to synthesize so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. So you get your PowerPoint up.
Sure. And I'll just compliment you guys while we do that. This is my first time, surprisingly, in the library, and I'm embarrassed I have not been up here before. So it's a beautiful library. I have no idea how big it was. I've walked by a million times, but just never stopped inside. And absolutely one of those shirts, they're great.
Well, thank you. Yeah. These are the special staff. So I can't share that.
Oh, no. Should sell those. That could be a good fundraiser.
And I'll be you just tell me when you want to advance.
Excellent. So I'll go ahead and advance and, what kind of, so let me just, kind of explain this. I'm assuming that maybe unlike, so the planning commission and some of the other standing commissions that we've talked to have kind of heard about some of this. I'm not sure how familiar you folks are with a lot of this planning work, the framework, et cetera. But essentially, the state of Oregon in 2007 said that we want to reduce our emissions 75% by 2050. We're massively off track to do that, particularly transportation sector. So how can we get back on track? And that's where a lot of, I'm going to say us, because I didn't have anything to do with it, but a lot of the people who are really nerdy about parking kind of laser focused on that because over the last 15, 20 years, really in the time since 2007, there's been a lot of research. There have been a lot of kind of aha moments regarding how we plan for parking. The key one, I'm not sure if you've heard this name. Hopefully you have his book somewhere in your library because it's a fantastic one, probably the singular volume to check out if you want to know about parking. But it's by Donald Shute. It's called The High Cost of Free Parking. It came out in 2006. And it was just a really deep dive into how cities around the country are regulating parking and requiring parking minimums. And it really presented just a trove of evidence that the way we do parking is not really a healthy way. And I'll tell you the way we do it, and I'll tell you why. The way we tend to do it is with this approach that, you know, if you have a certain land use you're building, say a restaurant, and it's a certain floor area, say 1,000 square feet, well, that's probably pretty small, 10,000 square feet, let's say. You're required to kind of look up a formula, it's in your zoning code. Where did it come from your zoning code? Probably nobody knows, it probably came from somebody else's zoning code, whoever adopted theirs a few weeks before yours did, and so on up the road. And so what this has led to is a situation where you have a lot of overbuilt parking. You've all seen it, the big parking lots that are, you know, half empty, even on busy shopping days, even on Black Friday, famously, a lot of like retail parking spaces are available in big lots and that sort of thing. So as part of CFEC, the state really has laser focused on this with the goal, and this is important, the goal is not to preclude the building of new parking. The goal rather is to allow developers, allow business owners the bandwidth to develop a parking plan that works for them. So it's kind of been one thing I have noticed doing parking for many, many years. People that are normally left of center on a lot of issues tend to be right of center on parking and vice versa. And I think this applies to institutions as well. So you're normally fairly left, capital S state of Oregon is really kind of taking a very free market approach here and saying, okay, we're going to just waive a whole lot of these regulations and we're going to let the market decide how much parking is needed to support particular developments. So that is the 20,000 foot view. We'll look at some of the specific things that Oregon City is doing to kind of execute this as we advance to the next slide. So yeah, we could kind of skip this one. We're just here to kind of talk about this and get your feedback, get your thoughts. This is part of a mini, I guess, meeting, about a month and a half so far. We've been kind of going around, some combination of myself, Pete, and the community development director, Aquila, who I'm sure you probably know. I've been going to all of the various standing commissions and getting your feedback. We're kind of at the end of the process now and really turning that into a set of code recommendations that will run through that process. But absolutely, we're here to get your feedback, hear your thoughts on implementation, and just kind of have a fun talk about parking generally. So next slide. So essentially, the state provided a few different paths to compliance for cities to follow. The goal is they want to target, especially these overbuilt parking lots, but still give cities the latitude to interpret their development code the way they want to and, you know, shape the way their city grows and evolves over time. There are 3 compliance paths. I don't want to on these, but Oregon City is adopting option 3. What is option 3?
Okay.
Yeah, essentially what it is, if you look at that transit map there, no matter what, you are not allowed to have minimum parking requirements within that area shown on that transit map.
What do you mean by minimum parking requirements?
So minimum parking requirements, good question. That's the thing in the zoning code that says if you are building a 10,000 square foot restaurant, you must have at least, usually it's per 1,000 square feet. So say
Okay.
2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So in the case of a hypothetical minimum or hypothetical restaurant of 10,000 square feet, the zoning code would require, I'm not sure if this is around this, if it's not too, but something like 20 parking spaces.
And it's also just like prescribed, like having it have to be handicap accessible or ADA.
Yeah, there's a lot of other codes about ADA accessibility and that sort of thing as well, so, yeah.
And that's off street parking.
Correct.
Yeah.
So within that area there, kind of under any path to compliance, the state is just requiring you to eliminate parking minimums within that area. And also adopt parking maximums, which is to say builders can build parking, but they can't build more than a certain amount per square feet. Works the same as minimums except in reverse, obviously. So what option 3 entails, you eliminate parking requirements there, and then you enact a number of other reforms, some of which you already have. So a key one is having parking meters, which of course you have. So that's another reason we chose option 3. We've already got a lot of these boxes checked in Oregon City. So essentially the compliance option that we're taking involves eliminating parking minimums there, and then reducing minimums for a certain number of uses, typically things like affordable housing or memory care facilities, things like that. Then there are a number of other kind of, just real quick. Yes, please.
This is the frequent transit corridor.
I'm sorry.
So which is like 4 bus stops an hour, and that, within a half mile of that, we can't require parking. And also within our downtown, which is considered a climate-friendly area, we can't require parking. So that's taking in both of those areas.
Okay, yeah. So that's one piece, and then the other piece are essentially things like, landscaping requirements and parking lots and those sorts of things. We'll talk a little about those. Next slide. So this is kind of what I just summarized. We can skip past. So what do we have to do here? As I said, eliminate parking requirements within that half-mile buffer of the frequent transit line. Reduce or eliminate requirements. So eliminate requirements for things like small unit size apartments. I think it's less than 750 square feet. Mixed-use developments, childcare facilities, bars and taverns, et cetera. You could read those. I won't go through all of them. And then for developments that include certain features, this is pretty interesting. The requirements will be reduced. So those features are solar power, wind power, EV charging, car sharing spaces, or accessible units. Those are residential units, not parking stalls. Accessible residential units above the minimum required. And I'm not sure offhand what code requires minimum units, if it's your development or state code, but additional units above that, you can go below parking requirements. Next slide. The other key changes in addition to those regulatory ones, or rather the policy ones, the minimum ones, are design changes. As I said, big parking lots, which are more than 1/2 acre, are required to do a number of things, include give carpools preferential treatment, allow redevelopment of parking spaces for bike parking or, bus stops, waiting areas, that sort of thing. Allow and encourage redevelopment of underused parking. That was an interesting one. We had a lot of conversation on through the outreach process. Essentially, that's encouraged to get things like, again, restaurants are a good example. Maybe you have more parking spaces than you need because code required 20 and you only need 10. Well, those 10 spaces or some portion of them could be very valuable as things like outdoor seating or that sort of thing. So the code intends to allow for that possibility while also giving Oregon City the ability to retain, the ability to regulate that through their development code the way they could now. So, shared parking is another one, and a key one that we spent a lot of time discussing during the process is what we want these to look like. So the state gives us 3 potential paths forward. One is to meet a tree canopy requirement that Oregon City almost already meets, but just has to adopt a couple minor tweaks to make sure we do meet it. The second way to make parking lots a little more climate friendly potentially, instead of having all that asphalt there with the sun beating down directly on that, stick some solar panels above there and use it for power generation. There was a lot of interest in that potential as we went through the engagement process. So at least the initial path to compliance and code recommendations that I gave to the city 2 hours ago allow for both of those possibilities. Then the last piece of it is bike parking requirements. Essentially, we have to tweak your bike parking requirements a little bit, but parking where the bike parking code in Oregon City is really pretty robust and pretty good from a design standpoint, so we don't have to do a lot there to meet those requirements, but there's another process that we probably hear a presentation on in the next couple of years, which is going to be an update of your transportation system plan, basically the big plan that kind of governs everything around how Oregon City, how people get around Oregon City. You'll have to adopt a few things there that make sure we provide for bike parking on the street in downtown Oregon City and small scale mobility devices, things like that, and do that in a certain number of ways that, make sure we maintain visibility corridors for pedestrians and those sorts of things as well. So some design requirements there, but a lot of things that several things that are applicable now, several things that are applicable later on down the road during that other process. Next slide, please, which will talk about some of the areas where there is some broad latitude in how Oregon City can interpret that and implement these requirements. Again, we're coming to you guys relatively late in the process, but we got a lot of feedback here and already made preliminary recommendations. If you really, really don't like them, then we can still move on it. But essentially, there were some open-ended questions about how the code can be structured regarding the redevelopment of those underused off-street parking spaces. There was a heck of a lot of discussion, as I said, around the choice between a tree canopy or solar panels. There was also a third option that folks generally were fairly lukewarm on, which allowed you to charge a fee in lieu. If you don't know what that is, what it sounds like. I don't want to follow this requirement. Okay, then you will have to pay $1,500 or more per parking space. There wasn't a lot of interest in that from the various boards, commissions, and other folks who commented. Most people think that, or thought that if a development necessitated a half acre or more of parking spaces, rather than put it just into a bank account where it may or may not ever get used for something else. And folks would rather just have that solar generation capability or the aesthetic improvements of the landscaping. So, next slide, please. One thing I sort of glossed over here, you are required to meet EV charging minimums in certain spaces for multi-unit, or in certain cases, I guess only in one certain case, which is 5 or more unit residential development, multifamily residential development. There was a lot of discussion on the outreach process in terms of how best to accommodate this, making sure we keep the walkways clear, that sort of thing. Do we want to meet this requirement? Do we want to really push EV charging and have more than 40%, maybe 100% of spaces at multi-unit developments be EV ready? Some cities have done that, but our fairly broad consensus over the course of our outreach is let's just keep it at 40% and, kind of, again, trust the invisible hand. If there's more demand than that for EV parking, then hopefully developers will put that in. But on the flip side of that, we also wanted to be very cognizant around cost burdening developers. The charging could be relatively expensive, added to an already significant expense of building the parking space to begin with. So want to be cognizant of that as well, and to make sure we're, considering the housing affordability issues and those sorts of things that the state wants us to be considering and implementing this.
And Brian, on that point, the requirement is just to put in the conduit, right? As far as it to actually put in the chargers.
Yeah, that's a good question, and another point I glossed over a little bit. The requirement is for the conduit, and I think the source of that, as they were putting together these rules, there are two separate charging standards that were kind of, like VHS and Betamax. I said that in front of Planning Commission and Cornelius last night, where there were two very new planning commissioners, and I got blank stare. I think everyone here is going to get the reference but they're two separate charging standards, kind of duking it out for supremacy. And I think the state wanted to make sure that it was worded in a way that however that wound up, this would be an applicable rule that cities would know what to do with. So yeah, conduit is the way I think they settled on doing that. So that is the requirement, as Pete said, not what I initially intimated, which is the charging itself. Lastly, but not leastly, parking, bike parking we talked about already. There was some discussion about how to accommodate e-bikes, cargo bikes, family bikes, but by and large, your spacing standards in the bike parking design standards are pretty good. So I think they're in compliance with what the state is trying to do there in terms of accommodating, the range of bikes as people move from, we all rode 10 years ago to, long tails, electric bikes, bikes with, front cabins for the kiddos and that sort of thing. And now we're on to my last point, parking maximums there. So Oregon City is, above 25,000, I think we're about 40,000. So you are required to adopt one final piece of legislation, which is the parking maximums. Now, you're only required to adopt those within that transit buffer area. Couple things shape this. Number one, you already have parking maximums that meet or exceed the standards that you're required to adopt within the climate friendly and equitable communities rules. I think Metro required parking standards a couple of years ago when Oregon City adopted those. So you're in compliance except with multifamily housing, which has to be reduced. The maximum for that has to be reduced a little bit. A key question over the course of the outreach was, well, do we want to do that just within the transit buffer as we're required to, or should we do that citywide? And there was a fairly broad consensus on that point. I think that just for the simplicity of having one code, one set of maximums apply to the entire city, let's just put them in citywide. So yeah, that's essentially the long and short of it. The next slide, I think, will detail the process, which again, this has been going on from the city's perspective for a couple of years now. I jumped on toward the middle of last year and took it through the ad hoc advisory committee that we formed. Over the last few months, we've been taking it to members of the public as well as the standing commissions. And over the next few months, it's a type 4 adoption process. That means planning commission makes a recommendation, city council over the course of 2 meetings, hopefully approves it, and everything is enacted by June 30th. I'm not sure what happens if we don't enact it. My best guess is they kick you out of the state and you have to join California. So enjoy that sales tax. Enjoy the income tax. Yeah, right. Maybe Idaho.
Maybe, Idaho Peninsula or, Idaho, greater Idaho.
The state of Canada.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah, I would just add that as a metro city, we have enacted a lot of these regulations already.
Yeah.
We have shared parking allowances for people to, share parking that they're not using within 1,000 feet of their proposed use. So if somebody moves in and they have a small restaurant, but not much parking, but they can negotiate with an adjacent owner to do that. One example. And then, we have to modify some of the maximum parking ratio requirements for multifamily in particular. And the other interesting point is that you'll notice that this buffer takes up a big chunk of the city, and the majority of the zoning outside of the buffer is yellow or residential, which doesn't have parking. It never has. So that's very much always been a market-driven thing where home builders will have garages attached to the house and a driveway which accommodates plenty of parking, and there's no review requirement under the zoning code for parking in those areas. So we're largely targeting off-street parking requirements for non-residential and multifamily uses in these climate-friendly areas.
So Pete, is this retroactive? I mean, are they going to require existing?
No, it won't be requiring existing parking lots to do it, but it wouldn't stop someone from redeveloping their existing parking if they wanted to put in an extra tree canopy or solar charger or parklet or outdoor seating, let's say, or bike park. Yeah.
Would there be fun? Is there grants or something available?
That's a great question. It's like, what level does the city
Yeah.
want to accommodate and incentivize and provide funding for redevelopment in the form of some dedicated fund?
Mhm.
If, for example, we charge $1,500 for each space that someone wanted to build but couldn't.
Mhm.
So, that's something the city commission will have to
Yeah.
wrestle. Yeah.
All right. Any questions?
I have a curiosity question. Take an existing building like the library that expanded. How's that dealt with in terms of parking requirements?
Yeah, when the library expanded, it was, 2012. There was some existing off-street parking in the lot. And then there was credit given for available on-street parking as well. Curbside adjacent to the library, which has streets all around. So there's that. And being in a mixed-use area, institutional zoning area, it had some reduced parking requirements. I think the planning commission approved whatever parking you were able to find.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm remaining conspicuously silent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I don't know, there are some provisions for shared parking availability associated with adjacent uses as well, including the fire station and some city-owned land.
Pioneer Center.
Yeah, Pioneer Center, bingo. Yeah.
Great. Anything else? Bill?
Yeah, at the end of the day, who are we trying to motivate to change their behavior? But like a 4-bedroom apartment is not going to live within 2 spaces or 2.5 spaces max. Even they'll be all over the streets, all over the neighborhood. Restaurants, especially downtown, they're all over the streets. People wait until the meters go free. And with the courthouse moving in May or June, that's going to change the dynamics of downtown a lot. I think people will go more to the restaurants than park.
Yeah.
But who are we trying to modify the behavior?
I think it's less talking about modifying behavior is looking at the true value of real estate and how it's used and how valuable it is. And we don't want to create, barriers to redevelopment of some of these areas. And the more value is created in these higher density areas, the harder it is to redevelop when you have a very prescriptive minimum parking requirement. So there's that aspect of it as well. But in terms of changing behavior, it may have the effect on people finding parking less convenient and having to find an alternative. But I don't know if we're targeting people. And there is an equity aspect to this where we have to look at multifamily in particular and accommodate a certain amount of electrical vehicle charging for that. So I don't know, Ron, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so that's sort of the meta question, right? But what the heck are we trying to do here?
Apartments with 4 vehicles to get rid of 2 of them because they're inconvenient, or they're just they're not going to drive any differently, probably. If they use 2 regularly and the other 2 are just junkers and they drive once a month, then, we're not changing the environmental issues.
That seems like that bigger transportation plan that you mentioned, like there's a larger thought about the.
Yeah,
public transportation, bike lanes.
Well, for the specific notion too, I think this is a good example of like the minimum parking requirements are sometimes a little, how do we set them? I would push back against the notion that a 4-bedroom apartment would have 4 driving adults living in it. I would assume a 4-bedroom apartment would be something like, 2, maybe mom, pa, the grown kid. And so maybe you're up to 3 driving adults there, but is that going to be consistent over the 4-bedroom apartments where you have 3 driving? So, maybe it makes sense to just assume those are bigger families and have that. But even so, I think there's a couple, and it's an interesting thing, and, we've been kind of arguing about for the last 20 years, right? You are trying to change behavior, but that's not the only thing you're trying to do. The first thing you're trying to do is prevent this thing where you have parking lots that are super, super oversized to begin with. So how do you do that? That is what the state settled on. And I think there's evidence, I think what the research and how the economics of it are kind of panning out is that, the free market is doing a pretty good job here because if you, and there's a big, but I'm gonna oversimplify something and then I'm gonna come in with a caveat because I like this question. So I can't sell a house if I have 1 parking space and all the demand is for 2 cars. But I can't rent an apartment similarly if, I'm trying to rent out an apartment that has only 2 parking spaces that come with it and everybody that wants to rent it is a household with 3 or 4 driving adults. So hopefully that will convince me not to do that and to provide the right amount of parking there. And if I'm a developer or business person worth my salt, that's just going, especially the lenders are very particular about wanting to make money and are famous for not lending in a lot of situations where they don't believe adequate parking is supplied and that sort of thing. So that's piece 1. Now, here comes the white lie I told. Sure, people, rent if there's no parking. It's happening in Portland all the time. Because there's street parking, right? So you can kind of come in, and that is where the state says, okay, well, there's going to be more demand on your public facilities. That's where you have to manage your parking. Right. And there's a number of requirements for that too. So that's the one piece. And the other piece is the behavior change. So whose behavior are we trying to change here? I think the answer is whoever the heck can get to self-select to live in an apartment without parking or to live, obviously easier in Portland than Oregon City, but my wife and I share 1 car, so, both, I'm sort of gainfully employed, she is, so, it can be done. So there are streams of demand, I think, again, there's more Portland context than an Oregon City context, but there are people here probably that want to live, maybe not car free, but 1 car per, husband and wife or whatever. So let's hope that by regulating the parking, we keep the options open for those people. Now, as you well know, and I know too, okay, guy, you want to, live this way, why'd you drive here? Well, because it would have taken me 1 hour and 40 minutes to get here by the TriMet, and it's 45 in nightmare traffic from Portland, so 20 going back. So that's the other piece of that, beyond the scope of my contract, unfortunately, it's unsatisfying, but I do think there's a piece that for that behavior change to happen, transit has to be there. Or bike facilities have to be there or closer to there than it is in Oregon City right now.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense? Does that, high level overview of that question?
Just needs more Googling later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So please let me know if you have any follow-up questions or comments.
Thank you.
And if you have any of those you want to send up, you can send them to me and I'll
Great.
I can forward it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for listening to us. See you all.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, the next item is Books on Wheels overview. I presume you are here.
Speaking of.
Hopefully you have somewhere to park, so you can be when you're delivering those books.
Trying to solve the problem in downtown Oregon City and the transportation area.
So Denise.
Not to go out to dinner there because there was no parking. I drove to town center. It's just not a good thing.
No, I mean, yeah, a big picture.
Denise was going to present this along with Kelly. Denise is unavailable tonight, so I am just going to pass it on to our neighborhood organization coordinator, and she is going to give some information about a new service that we're offering.
Yeah, I think I came in and spoke to you some months ago about our library mail program, which has gotten some no pun intended, some wheels. But we recently started a new collaboration with the Pioneer Center and their Meals on Wheels program. And we're super excited about this collaboration. It's been an easy one to start up because their vetting process is it aligns with what we need to check to make sure that any patient could be within our service area and that they qualify for this service. The other thing that's wonderful about it is aligns with our DEI goals and our goals to expand the walls of the library out to the community and reach some harder to reach groups. And so the Meals on Wheels is for anyone who can't get into the library for any reason, whether they're having surgery, have an illness, or have diminished mobility issues and can't drive or don't swim and bring them in. And what we do with the Meals on Wheels folks is every time they're vetted through any intake of a client, as they call them for Meals on Wheels, gets an application. And if they express interest, they return the completed application to their driver. The driver then brings them into the Pioneer Center and they're forwarded on to us. We reach out with a welcome letter and touch base with them to see whether they can put things on hold themselves or need help with that. Their clientele often are not super computer savvy or don't have that capability. So then we do, work with them to find items that they might like. And then once a week, they're put into a canvas tote and taken over to the Pioneer Center. It has their name on it, and their driver delivers it to them. As homebound patrons, there are no late fees, so they have some grace period there. And when they're done with them, they put them back in the tote, hand them to the driver, and brought back over to do those. So we're really excited about this because it'll help be a lifeline to some degree to folks that have struggle with loneliness, isolation, and get the library into their hands. And I think in your packet, there's the application that they're given, the welcome letter, as well as a mock-up of the totes that we've ordered. Canvas totes with the library logo and then the Books on Wheels logo.
So do you have plans already for the Books on Wheels?
Yeah, we have two. And then I just spoke with Alex over the Pioneer Center actually this morning, and she said she was a list of about 21, which is many more than we were expecting. And Denise had, at the conference that she went to, actually to do with the outreach vehicle, there was a presentation from another library system that was really working with Meals on Wheels. And it's about 5 to 10% of their clientele, so if they have 120 clients, then it's a pretty small number, which was desirable to us because it's manageable as we begin. But Alex has alluded to 21 people that have expressed interest, and she was touching with Cecily today actually about us giving them a call and making contact and see if we can get them involved.
That's great.
So, yeah.
I just love this notion of piggybacking on a program that's successful.
Yes.
That's already there. It's got people, they know each other.
Yes.
It's trusting, but it's really smart.
And the drivers on those wheels have really great relationship with their clients, and so they can talk it up, and it's another point of contact for these folks that are super isolated.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good. Any questions, concerns?
It's really great. Partnership, it's just.
Is it just books or, there's like some other materials?
Yeah, they can do books, DVDs,
Yeah, I was just curious, like,
obviously. They can do video games if they want.
So just any of the materials?
Yeah. Yeah, we're not doing library things, it's kind of complicated. But pretty much anything else they want, we can get to that. Yeah, so two folks that are dedicated to making this happen and doing it seamlessly, so.
Do you think you're gonna have a cap, or are you just gonna judge to see what the interest is? I mean,
Rolls out, I don't think a cap in.
right, I would just be curious, you know, when you're talking about staff time, like what capacity might look like, or like concern-wise, what might be end up being something.
Yeah, I think Greg and Lisa have been really great about touching base on that. And I think the two folks that are on my team, the sort of team that we've definitely had an eye to the future, to this expanding. I think the library rec nail program is actually the one that will be more time intensive because that's open to, many more people. They don't have in any one season a huge clientele base over there. It's, maybe 150, something like that. So, I think it will not be a huge burden on us.
That's true. And they're there every day. They really, I take a class at the planning center a couple of mornings a week, and they're so busy.
But I probably don't have this. I was just curious what the area is that the Meals on Wheels covers versus kind of like.
They do go out of our service area. They cover also the Westland and kind of over toward Ella. But this program is just for folks in Oregon City because that's our service area.
You wouldn't be somebody in Beaver Creek, for example, it's only in town?
Oh, within our service area.
Oh, within the service area.
Anybody that Meals on Wheels serves within our service area. So yes, it could be some of the further outlying, which is great.
Great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
And I'll just echo, Ellen and the regulation team at Denise have done a great job putting this together. I think especially Pioneer, I'm really pleased with that in the past year, how much closer we've been able to work with Pioneer. It's been.
Yeah, Cecily and Alex are great. I'm super excited about working in different capacities with us. This was a sort of a home run stuff.
Yeah.
So how does it look specifically get from here to there?
We walk once a week. So
So the book like take them over.
yeah.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. I was thinking more pneumatic. We always say we want pneumatic tube systems.
All the city.
Yeah. All facilities.
Like in the old J.C. Penney's.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, that would be a great stem.
Drone delivery.
I think it's just tunnels underneath the whole city.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any problem.
We walk over and we pick up the acts, but the staff sort of enjoy the individual trip.
Oh, okay.
Stays, less than 10 minutes. So it's easy. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. That's good.
All right, Greg, Budget Subcommittee.
All right, so I want to be respectful of time. I wanted to give a quick update on, you saw the minutes, and the other members of the committee, please feel free to chime in on the things we talked about. I put in the packet, I know it's hard to read there, that is the updated kind of 10-year forecast that we had done 2 years ago. And the main thing I shared with the subcommittee in terms of this forecast, I've also shared with the finance department and city administration, is pretty much the same as last time. We're pretty good for a few years, for 6 or 7 years. The debt being paid off in 10 years will be nice. The thing that is of the most concern to me right now, and which I shared with our city administration, is that our capital needs, our capital replacement needs. This year, I was able to pop those in the appropriate budget year. I've shared with this body meeting. We have a report from a consultant who came through and looked at the entire facility and said, okay, based on average lifespans, you're going to need to replace your floor in these years, your carpet in these years, your HVAC in these years. And so in 2030 and 31, that biennium, there's about $1.5 million potentially of capital repair and replacement that is going to be needed in order to keep this facility operating and running well. that's a big hit to our, fund balance. We're going to be using a little bit of fund balance going forward. Once we hit that, in absent any other funding mechanism or any change in the district rate or anything like that, that represents a big hit, and we don't necessarily have a great revenue stream, to pay for that. So it's after that, in a couple of years, we start to get to the point where our fund balance is less than what our finance department has said we need to keep in the bank. It's about 52% is what we're aiming for. So there's no answers right now, but it's just something I want to assure everybody that I do keep that front and center with our finance department. One of the great things is we're using new software to do budgets this year. That new software does have a forecasting component built in, and our finance department is very, very supportive of departments starting to use that. So I do plan to transfer this into that forecasting component so that we can continue.
It's also another lever for us to get support from the city commission for a new district rate, if we get to that point in the coming years, which we anticipate we will.
The other things, I'll just hit the highlights of some of the things that we talked with the budget committee about. These are things that I did include in our initial budget requests that went to the finance department. In terms of staffing, the way that city administration had asked us to submit our budgetary requests is, kind of do a current services, budget at current levels, and then we have add-ons. Each add-on is a separate request they can evaluate and run numbers for separately. So some of the staffing add-ons we asked for we have about 5 part-time staff members who we could, I hate putting it like this, but we could offer them a few more hours a week, which would really help us operationally while still keeping them at the same benefit tier. So that is a fairly inexpensive way to give them more opportunities to work more, gives us a little more stability. So we did put that in. I want to say all told, all of those together, it was probably no more than $30,000-$40,000 a year, which is not
a huge ask.
For new staff, we did indicate we would like to explore an additional manager for the library. I shared with the subcommittee, I shared our org chart. As I think I mentioned to the whole group, we have about 30 employees right now. In a few months, it may be closer to 32 or 33 because we have to get some more on calls. And there's Denise and myself as the managers for that. It's a lot. And so city administration has recognized that this is for a risk and this is something that we'd like to accommodate. So we have put in a request, to look at those numbers. Also put in a request for another part-time employee to help in our current in the computer lab area. That is probably the area that we are still most reliant on calls, benefits. And we figured if we were able to add another 0.65 FTE to that would help with some stability, some staffing stability, and help us continue to move towards more of our staff having some level of benefits. So those were the staffing asks. I will say, I shared with the group, city is just starting union negotiations with the police and AFSCME. We don't know what that's going to result in. We did do a little bit of an analysis, and right now the benefit load, we just got this refreshed for us today at an early meeting, a $40,000 to $80,000 a year employee, just salary employee. The budgeted benefit load is now about 70%, so it's about $56,000. So that's a huge, that's challenging. And when we go into bargaining, we're certain that benefits and salary and as they typically are, those are going to be the areas of negotiations.
And medical benefits went up 14%.
Yeah. So, and property tax in Oregon, 3% a year is basically all we're going to get. So that's something you're looking into. I did try to build in some of that escalation into the model here. So those are the staffing ones. For the kind of capital projects, some of the bigger projects, we forwarded the budget, the vehicle, the book lockers. Most of our other capital projects we think we're going to get done this year. We did put in this biennium. Probably the biggest one is, in having just done the floor, I hate to say this, but the carpet is next. So as part of our repair and replace schedule, this carpet needs to be done this biennium. So that's going to be a big chunk of change for doing that. We need to do the parking lot, the staff parking lot across the street. The asphalt is not in good condition. We got some estimates from both our public works department and some vendors. And as with anything, you can do the Band-Aid fix for cheaper, or you can do a much better fix for longer. And we decided to budget for fix. So we're estimating that's going to be in the $40,000 range to scrape off 3 inches of asphalt, put it all down, you redo it. We will have to restripe the parking spaces, because I don't think we're currently compliant with ADA.
This is a lot next to the Friends bookstore.
Yeah. So that's one of our big ones. We put in some money for, it's about time to update the furniture that we have in the community room that we use for programs and for people using the room. We want to update that. We also want to make it a little more flexible, so not just, we want to have more options than just big rectangular tables. Some rectangles, some smaller square ones, some circular ones, to help make that a little more flexible space. We also put in some money for redoing, upgrading the audiovisual in the community room. The projector there is not in great shape. When the building was expanded, projectors and screens were the way to go. Nowadays, the price just keeps coming down, and when you need to replace them, just pull the old one off the wall, buy a new one, and put it in. So we're looking at getting some of that equipment for that room, which will hopefully make it better for groups to use for virtual meetings and the like. The last thing I wanted to highlight for our allocated costs, I did put in our budget, we got together with a couple of other departments. The city is trying to do a better job of centralizing and standardizing communications and branding out to the community, which is a great thing and really helps, people. Better information, more timely information, more consistent information. So we did suggest that we would be in favor of helping to fund a new position in the communications department along with a couple of other departments. And so I did build in some extra allocated costs. Yeah, so it would be another person in the communications department that would also help, take off some of the load of what we have to do internally. Like Trail News, we have to put together our pages of Trail News. And to me, that's not a great use of our staff resources. I would just love to be able to say, here's our content. Make it all happen. And we would still keep some of our social media, the fun stuff, but a lot of the other, just regular communications, that's something that, if we generate the content once, they can take it and they can use it, or they can put it on there.
Great question. Has the city discussed this event manager issue? Because you got buried alive last year. I remember Juneteenth, and we don't want to repeat that experience.
I will say at the commission goal setting that happened 3 weeks ago at this point, this topic did come up. And I spoke to the challenges of doing things like this with existing staff and express support for another events, for that position.
Good.
Now, I did hear today, I'd have to go talk to Pioneer Center, because the staff member who's been helping with a lot of that works at Pioneer Center. So it's possible that Parks is also doing some reconfiguration of their staff to allow that person to focus more on these events and offload some of those. But yes, that is
big impact on your life and on.
Yes, it did. So, and I know that the commissioners are well aware of that situation, and I know they all, everybody loves having these events.
Yeah.
And I think if we want to do them and do them efficiently, do them well, that's resources. You gotta,
Yeah.
you put the resources for your priorities. I believe that's a community priorities. We'll see how.
All right, any questions for Greg so far? Are we gonna have any more budget committee?
I just got an email today about the next step in the budget process. So I believe our next meeting, Tony, city manager, is, I want to say it's March 10th. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. I don't yet have anything back from finance to share with the committee. We can certainly schedule another meeting, and if I have information to share, I can. I want you to feel part of the process.
Oh, yeah. When do the hearings start, the budget committee hearings?
Late.
Oh,
I will get the
Yeah,
calendar.
okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So, great.
But yeah, if we would, I mean, maybe if it's acceptable to the chair and the rest of the board, I will do a little work to figure out what the next schedule is, and we can set aside either the Friday, go a week from this Friday or 2 weeks from this Friday. It's another opportunity to meet, and if there's
Just gotta be, just reason to be. That sounds good. All right, communications. Let me just begin. I made a presentation, sort of our annual report to the city commission last week. And, it went well. People were very friendly and very supportive. And I think they appreciated everything that folks here and that the staff are doing. There's nothing but positive. But we'll just see as we go into budget whether that is sustained in reality. Okay, foundation.
Well, we're preparing for our April 3rd fundraising event, 4:30 to 6 on April 3rd at the Ainsworth House. You'll receive an invitation if you haven't already. So, very nice invitation design. So, we're working on selecting a caterer. We have the music arranged. There will be brief presentations by some, interested parties, but there'll be no speaker this year. Because we're kind of highlighting the technology and a couple of technology surprises, and Greg's gonna talk about, the library and moving forward beyond the walls, and that will do it. So it's gonna be a great event. You'll get a free adult beverage with your ticket, and then you can buy additional beverages as you see fit.
Is there gonna be a silent auction like last?
Yes, there'll be a raffle.
So you do.
Actually, I think they're going to do both.
I was gonna say, and there's going to be a silent auction. So.
Okay, so if you follow up with that.
So it's going to be, I think, a really nice event. We're looking forward to the venue at Ainsworth House. We're going in a week or two to visit the site to see how we want to set it up and finalizing all the details. So.
Friends?
The bookstore continues to be very successful. I'm getting tired of saying that over and over. In fact, it's so successful that it's becoming obvious that they have to start following standard business practices in a lot of areas. So the last meeting was primarily devoted to talking about essential insurance coverage for the officers and the volunteers, as well as liability for the patrons. They didn't make any decisions. They'll probably make a decision next time or the time after that. Really, that's the primary thing that happened at the meeting.
Great, okay. And Lisa's not here to address the teens and the youth, so do you have anything?
I don't. I can perhaps.
Sorry.
I need to.
Okay.
Need be. Okay, anything else? Any other questions or?
Just one thing, David.
Yeah.
I just want to recognize you for your presentation that you made to the City Commission because it was excellent. And it always makes me proud when you do it. And you do a great job with that.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Heartily second.
Yeah, we get a lot of support from the city. I mean, in the midst of a world where book banning and all this nonsense is happening all over the place, it's amazing that we don't get more of that stuff. And I think we got great support. So it's just knock on wood and continue.
And the questionnaire ratifies that too.
Yeah,
Satisfaction.
yeah, for sure. And I did mention to the commission that the task force has been reinstated, and that may well lead to requesting their support for a new rate and a new vote. And, you know, again, there were a couple of questions about, they very much appreciated us being the first library to work with the school district to get that.
Sure.
They felt that was terrific. So,
Well, they like being first for sure in the city.
all right. Thank you all, and see you next month. And the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.